I've been asked to talk about how we can grow journalistic talent for the year 2030. Now, Gavin has already mentioned the Paris attacks of last week, and for me, this tragedy gave us another example of the importance as well as the ecology of the modern news media. And if we look at how it was covered, we can see that the traditional media that had correspondents located in or near Paris were able to gather eyewitness accounts. They could get the reaction of the police, of government and of foreign governments. And of course they harnessed any user-generated content they could get, as well as using social media. They were live blogging, they were tweeting, they were uploading photos. Separately and independently, social media also played a part. Facebook, its safety check allowed users to click an I am safe button to let their family and friends know they were okay. On Twitter, various hashtags allowed people to give messages of support and even offer shelter to those caught up in the attacks. But hoaxes insinuated themselves throughout the internet. There were claims that the Eiffel Tower had gone dark. There were photos claiming to show what they just didn't. And there was even one blog that claimed that it was the attacks that were the hoax, and these were caused and organised by Mossad. So what does this tell us about the way forward to 2030? Well, the first thing is, more than ever, in this screaming agora of confusion, we need trusted voices. We need guides through the cacophony, and we need good information to help us understand what is a changing, challenging and potentially dangerous world. And I believe at this time of crumbling funding models that we've already talked about, that there is a place for our journalism schools, not just to grow journalistic talent, but also to protect public interest journalism. That is what we call big J journalism. Journalism that exposes wrongdoing, that holds power to account, and that reports news that's important for democracy as well as for society. We also need to recognise, and this has been mentioned a few times as well, that people now, they learn and they communicate differently. Therefore, we in the journalism schools need to be creative and courageous. So to grow talent for 2030, journalistic talent, I think we need to explore new ways of being journalists. Journalism, more than ever, is going to be about relationships, and this has been touched on as well. In the age of audience fragmentation, audience choice, being the trusted voice is likely to be the difference between survival and closure for many media organisations. So how do the journalism schools help to teach their students to build relationships? Well, this is where my three ideas come in. First, by teaching transparency in their reporting processes, and this is about building trust, ensuring that young journalists always provide the source material that they're basing their stories on, by links within the stories back to the source material, and by having clear fact-checking and verification methods that their audience knows about. Because journalism which trumpets the reporting effort and the journalistic grunt behind it is going to prove the most valuable. Secondly, by teaching a willingness to interact with the audience, involving them as co-writers, as researchers and as sharers of the stories. For example, we could ask the audience what it is that they would like covered, and you then use crowdsourcing methods to gather information. But it's not going to be just about relationships with the audience. Future journalism is going to be freelance, well, it's very likely to be freelance, and therefore it's about building relationships with different media organisations, different content providers. So journalists are going to have to be entrepreneurs, they're going to have to build their own brand, they're going to have to market their stories, and they're going to need to be taught how to run their own businesses. So, as has been mentioned, young people who've grown up with gaming, with reality TV, loving Jon Stewart, they require different ways of storytelling if they're going to be engaging to others. But no matter how many photo galleries, how many infographics, how much video, even if there are elements of gaming, even if there are elements of virtual reality, the audience needs to be confident of both the provenance and the accuracy of the material that's being used. And has been mentioned by Alistair, the elephant in the room here is funding. To make any of this happen, we need to consider new ways of funding, new ways of being journalists and being funded as journalists. It could be sponsorship, it could be donations, it could be crowdfunding or government. Now that's a separate talk, but my argument is that for the public to feel that journalism deserves to be funded, it needs to be reminded that democracy doesn't just happen. It requires a public and a media who are forever vigilant and at the same time able and willing to stand up when necessary to question the wealthiest and the most powerful. Thank you.